We start this video with a set of beady eyes peering into your souls. Obviously, this character as it is didn't have any textures, so I just quickly put a couple of materials on here so that it's easy to see how the eyeballs are reacting, because a gray eyeball in a gray head rotating is kind of hard to picture. So I've given Batman some beady googly eyes just for the purposes of illustration. It actually looks better than I thought. But yeah, he's a serious guy. So obviously, we want to connect our geometry, so the face and the, well, everything, cowl, eyeballs, eyelids, all to this setup. Now the eyeballs are the easiest. There's two ways we could do it. I'll do each eyeball slightly differently. So I'm going to select the parts of the head that aren't the eyeballs and hide them. You can see actually Batman here has separate eyelids for animation purposes, because the cowl covers up the rest of his face. So, but yeah, you can see they've created separate geometry for the eyelids. That's fine. So I'm going to do both eyeballs different ways. Depending on the requirements of your pipeline, you may have to do one or the other. Some video games require skinning for all the geometry. Some don't. If it's not for a game engine, if it's going to be for feature film, then either one of these methods is acceptable. Calculation-wise, the first method is the simplest. So literally, all I have to do is take the eyeball, select the joint, and parent the eyeball to the joint. Done. If this eyeball is parented to this joint, whenever that joint does anything or moves, you can see the eyeball is going to go with it. So you can see our setup is definitely working. Now, what you can optionally do is skin them. So if I want to, I can select the eyeball, select the joint, go into my skinning menu, bind skin options. Now for this one, it's very important. You definitely want to select or use selected joints just to be safe. Max influences 1. We only have one joint. Other than that, we don't really need to change anything. So this should automatically assign 100% of the weights to this one joint. Apply and close. So it's kind of like parenting in a roundabout sort of way. But how it's being connected internally is different. When you're parenting, the object's transform node is being instructed to follow the other object, so in this case, the joint. When you're skinning, the transform node for the eyeball is actually not following along. The vertices themselves are being instructed to follow along. So it's a different influence with the same end result. So I'm going to hit apply and close. And now if I move my eye control, both eyes are going to move fine. This one is skinned, this one is parented. Again, they both end up with the same result. But like I said, depending on the production and the requirements, you may choose one over the other, and depending on technical limitations. Because again, in the past, this is becoming less and less true, but in the past, in my experience anyway, some game engines only support skinning for connections of geometry to joints. And if you don't have them skinned, when you bring them into the game engine, the connection is broken. So that's a possibility. That's all research you have to do, or things that you would be told on the production when you're working. But as you can see, this is definitely doing what I wanted to. Beady Batman eyes following our controls. So that's pretty much it for connecting the eyes. Now, again, this is outside of the scope of this project and this assignment, but if you wanted to, you could also include the eyelids in these sorts of things, and you could add eyelid controls. There are a number of ways to do that. Generally speaking, if you want to use eyelid controls, you're going to need 2 extra joints for each eyeball, 1 joint, and so essentially you duplicate the eyeball joint 3 times. So there's a eyeball joint, an upper eyelid joint, and a lower eyelid joint, all sitting in the same place. And then what you would do is you would skin it so that the upper eyelid is got the skin weights for the top part of the eye, and the lower eyelid joint would have control over the lower part of the eye, and you would adjust those so that they each have nice smooth skin blending. And then once they're skinned, you would just control the eyelid open and close by rotating the joints that is influencing them. And You could use look at constraints to do that. You could have an eyelid control here, up and bottom, top and bottom, and have a look at constraint so that the eyelid will always kind of line up. You could set a node connection in the background and drive the rotation of these joints by the translation of the controllers. There's a number of ways you could set it up. Again, I would encourage you to explore it. Look at some other tutorials, see how other people do it. It's one of those things that very easy to set up based on what we already know, but exploring other people's techniques and workflows is always a great way to learn. So if you want to take it further and add those things, again, let me know and I can point you towards some resources. If you want to try it your own and bounce it off me and get some feedback on it, 100% do that. if you're interested in learning more about rigging, the best way to figure it out is try it, see what happens. Some things will fail, some things will work. It will all be a learning experience. But for now, all I care is that the eyeballs are moving. So that's good. The eyes are done. So now I need to worry about adding the skin for the face. So for this, I'm going to grab the face and the cowl, which are separated right now. I'm actually going to attach those, I think. So I'm going to select both of these, and I'm going to go modify, or sorry, that's a lie, not modify. I'm going to go back to the main modeling menu. I'm going to go to mesh and combine, and that will combine both of those meshes into one piece. Won't weld the vertices, it just makes them selectable as one. And then with them both selected, I'm going to go edit, delete by type, history, and making sure that I don't need to freeze it, which I don't. Looks like it's all zeros and ones for the scale, so that's all fine. So this is now a clean mesh that I can safely skin. So obviously the skinning is no different than anything else. We need to include all the joints that would influence this. So in this case, we need to include the neck, the jaw, and the head. Not the eyes. The eyes do not need to be skinned. We've already taken care of them, so we are going to leave them alone at this point. So again, we want the jaw, the head, and the neck. And you can also select them here. Make sure there's nothing selected but those three joints. Then you select your geometry. Go into your skinning menu. Go to bind skin. I'm going to reset the settings. Once again, selected joints. And then for the bind method, I'm going to use the closest distance here. I don't think geodesic voxel will give us much of a difference. If you want to experiment with it, you can. But I'm just going to use the basic closest distance, which is the default. And I'm going to, again, bring my max influences down to 3. And I'm going to hit apply. And now the head should be attached. You can see the other parts are left behind, which is fine. So you can see the weights need some work. So what I'm going to do is just start simple. I'm going to open up my Paint Skim Weights tool. And I'm going to go to the neck joint, and I'm literally going to flood all the weights to the neck. Smooth. I'm going to make sure I set this to replace. Set the values to 1 and hit flood. So now all the weights in the head are in the neck, so which is fine. Now I'm going to go to the head joint, and I'm going to paint everything else from the neck up into the head. I'm going to paint that manually. I can't flood that because then I'll overwrite what's happening in the neck, which I don't want to do. So I'm just going to go in with a white brush and start painting. I could do it that way, or I could use the component editor. If I just temporarily get out of the tool, go into vertex mode, Actually, in order to do that, I'm going to have to isolate the head. So I'm going to hit Control 1 to isolate the head. Makes it easier to select. I'm going to go to vertex mode. And yeah, in the side view, I will make a lasso selection. To get pretty much everything from the jaw up. And I'm going to assign all those values to the head. So I could paint it, or I could use the component editor. Again, whichever method you like. Component editor might actually be quickest in this case. If I go to Smooth Skins now and just set the head to 100% influence over those verts. There we go. So now if I test that, if I rotate the head, the upper part, you can see it's good. Now, it needs to be smoothed out, but the blocking of the weights are okay. So the neck controls everything. And the head is doing its thing. It's got some control. So now I'll go in with the paintbrush for sure. And just going to isolate this stuff so we're not seeing anything extra. Yeah, so now I can go in with my paint selection tool or my paint weights tool and soften and fine tune. So I'm going to go in with a nice soft brush, switch over to smooth. Just going to move that over here and create a better transition between the neck and the upper part of the head. I could mirror it. By the way, symmetry in humans is not really natural. So if you want it to look more realistic, less symmetry is not going to hurt. So don't feel like you have to mirror it exactly. Or once you do mirror it, if you want to rough up each side to make them slightly different, go for it. But yeah, I mean, just mess around with it. Play, experiment. Could use some more work. You guys get the idea. That's close enough for what I'm trying to demonstrate. Now the back of the neck still needs a little bit more, I think, neck influence, but overall it's not too bad. So now we've got a situation where the head and neck have all the control. So right now the jaw is doing almost nothing. Surprised it has any control at all, to be honest with you, because I thought I zeroed that out, but it looks like I missed something. But no big deal. Yeah, it does have a little bit of control here, but I'm going to add more anyway, so that's fine. So now that I've got that all set up, I'm going to go in with a soft brush with add, and I'm going to set my value to 0.25 to start with. And I'm going to start painting weight into the jawline. And I'm adding it to this jaw joint, so the joint is actually having some influence. And I'm going to add it up to the bottom of the lip. Now in a complex rig, you may have separate joints to represent and set up facial features. So you might actually have more joints than what we've got right now. So keep that in mind. But for this basic setup, I'm just trying to isolate the lip. And the bottom of the jaw. Try not to miss any verts here because they can be finicky. Especially when you got two pieces of geometry that meet. Going with a bit of a bigger brush now and just black that out. And now I'm going to go in with smooth one more time and smooth that just a little. Still got some work to do, but I'm going to leave it at that for now. I will do a mirror. So I'm going to go into skin, mirror skin weights, options, and I want to go from left to right, which is positive to negative. All this stuff we've done in the previous tutorials. And once again, have a look. And I did miss some of the cowl here, so I'm going to go back with add and make sure I add some influence there. All right. So now that I've got that blocked out, I'm going to test the jaw. And you get the idea. Now the skinning is 100% not perfect. You can see I missed a whole chunk of the lip here. But now that I've got the jaw open, I can come back with the paint tool and fine tune that. I'm going to switch this add over to 1 now so it's 100% and just kind of carefully take care of the bottom of the lip. Oops. And not try to paint anything I shouldn't. Looks weird, but now your character would normally have separate tongue cavity and all that stuff. Again, not going to worry about that here. Oops. This is where it can get a little bit finicky, so I'm going to go with a smaller brush and make sure I only get the verts that I want. I'm going to go in with a 0.25 again because I think the 0.5 is or 0.1 is a bit harsh. Just getting the inside of the mouth. So I'm setting it obviously to 100% influence right now just to get the kind of baseline in place, and obviously it wouldn't be 100% in the end. I would smooth the relationship between the upper and lower part of the mouth out so that there's a smoother transition. There's a nasty bird here that's being cranky. There we go. So now I'm going to go in and smooth. Smoothing is really important with the face, especially. So I'll put this back at 0. Oops. I had the wrong thing selected there. Or did I? What's going on? Did I not zero that out? Maybe I forgot to freeze transformations on my jaw, which is not smart. Yeah, it looks like I did. Looks like I did, so I'm just gonna get that back to where it was-ish. I'm going to unparent that for a second. Goodness, I don't know what I did here. Apparently when I went back and quickly showed the IK, I missed a step somewhere because my orientations are all messed up. Okay, so I just unparented the IK. There's my controller not frozen, stupidly. I'm going to freeze the transformation so that it's all zeroed out. And now I can parent my IK back. Just gotta find it. There it is. There we go. So now to control the mouth, you would essentially paint the weight between the head and the jaw. So if you don't want the corners of the mouth to come down less, you would go back to the head with the add brush, and again a small value. And paint towards the jaw, and that'll pull the bottom of the mouth up. If you wanted to have a little bit less influence, then you could smooth that out again. And you would fine tune that to get it to where you want. And again, whether you used the IK method or the FK method, the skinning requirements would be identical. You still would need the same influence between the same joints, and that wouldn't change depending on the control setup you use. The skinning is more reliant on the joint system than it is the control system. So a good skin for either system will be the same. So ultimately, we've pulled the whole thing together. We've got a full head control, which is kind of like the head God node in a sense. It's the master of everything above the neck. Then we've got the head independent control. Then we've got the jaw control. Then we've got the eye control. And that pretty much is what I'm looking for this setup. So this, in conjunction with the hands, is pretty much going to get you everything you need for from a rigging standpoint for the assignment 3 rigging path. So if you go this route, at the very least, this is the level of control I want to see. If you go above and beyond and add more controls, that is obviously perfectly fine. I would never discourage anyone from doing more. But this is the bare minimum you would need to meet the requirements of the assignment. So have fun. I hope you learned a bunch with these tutorials together. As I've said before, this is not the be-all, end-all of this is how you rig a character. It's pretty much, I wanted to design these tutorials in a way where I could introduce different ideas individually, show you how they could apply, and hopefully give you enough insight so that you could have an understanding of how all this works and get creative with rigging on your own and just try different things out. That was the goal. So everything else, like I said, if you want to take this any further, 100% let me know, and I'll point you towards some resources that I've found useful over the years. And there are quite a few good ones out there nowadays with Maya.